Welcome back to Changing Austin. I am Stacey Armijo, and I am thrilled to introduce you to today's guest, Dr. Colette Pierce Burnette. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Fantastic. So I'm going to kick us off with the reason I am excited to have you on this podcast. As you know, and our regular listeners probably know, our organization, our podcast is about how do we connect those who have been in Austin for a long time with those who are coming to Austin as part of our growth. What is it that we keep about what has come before, and what is it that we can evolve into in the future? And you have a particularly unique perspective, because you spent a lot of time in a very important role in our community, and then you took a role in another community for a while, and you're back in a different important role. Can you bring our audience up to date on that?
So I'm an example of what it looks like to fail retirement. I failed retirement twice. I served as the president of Houston Tilson University from 2015 to 2022, just a glorious chapter in my life, and came to really, really love Austin. And in hindsight, I see now that I retired from the university, but I didn't retire from Austin. It's the kind of city that draws you into its fabric, and my experience here really emphasized being drawn into a fabric of a community. So I served in a cultural institution for a short period of time and then retired again. And I was coming back and forth to Austin. I have very dear friends here still, and I also sat on two boards at the same time. So I've been back and forth to the city, and I was staying at the Placemaker on 2nd Street, and I was on the Waterloo Greenway board when I was here. So I saw that the project had progressed tremendously, and saw the construction. I got super excited about it. So I had dinner that evening with Christopher Kennedy from Leadership Austin, and I asked him about the project, and he was doing some consulting work with them, and he was sharing the updates, et cetera. And then he said, they may be looking for a CEO soon. And then in Christopher Kennedy's way, he said, you would be a really good CEO. But at that time, I was rather enjoying wearing my fuzzy pajamas all day if I wanted to. I could drink wine at 4 if I wanted to. So I hedged, but it planted that in my soul. And I several months later, I got a call saying that they had opened the search and that I was being invited to invited to apply. And it was Jessica Weaver, who I also know, who made the call. So I talked to my husband about it, and he said something very interesting. He said, "You really love that city." He said, and I think you feel like your work is not done. And that's from someone who knows me. 43 years of marriage, he knows me. And that was true. So I put my name in the hat, and I'm super competitive. So then I got nervous. I knew the competition. It's a great role, great position, and I really, really wanted it. And I was very blessed to now serve as the CEO of Waterloo Greenway Conservancy.
Well, congratulations.
And back in Austin. I live in the same building downtown that I lived in when I was here.
So you literally came
home. I literally came home. Literally came home.
Wow.
Right.
Okay, so we're gonna get back to that about what drew you back to Austin. But before we do, Waterloo Greenway, for some of us, is a place where there's great concerts. I feel like it's a little bit more than that. Tell us a little bit about what it is.
So Waterloo Greenway is 1.5 acres along Waller Creek, 1.5 miles, along Waller Creek, and 35 miles of green space parks. 35 acres of green space park. So 1.5 miles of the creek and then 35 acres of green space from 15th Street to Ladyburg, or longtime Austinites Town Lake.
Sure.
Ladybird Lake. And its purpose is it's a reclamation of green space. The mission is to connect people with nature, art, culture, and each other. So the reason I say it's a reclamation is, which is another word for change, is because Waterloo Park used to be a very vibrant area. A very vibrant place for Spamorama. I read where it had Woodstock, Mess with Texas. It had all kinds of festivals there in that park during the 70s and the 80s. And then and there were African American and Mexican American and middle income families that had vibrant communities in that area along what we know as Waller Creek. And then through flooding, segregationist policies, urban renewal, that was lost. So the under the intention, the mission is to reclaim and reconnect that space as a gathering space for all of Austin to be able to bring that kind of beauty and energy and vibrancy. Because from my own childhood, I remember some of my most joyful moments. I was raised in an urban area. I'm from Cleveland, but some of my most joyful moments as a child was in green spaces and outdoor spaces and community gatherings. And the park was a place where they had voter registration drives. It was really a community. It was a communal stage. So to be able to bring that back to Austin and to be able to do that kind of reconnection, that reclamation, if you will, that community joy through our programming, through the beautiful spaces that we can offer, and also environmental sustainability at the same time. Who doesn't want that to be their mission?
Absolutely. Well, and that's fascinating to me because, I mean, green space comes up constantly when we talk about Austin. I know when I travel, if you say, oh, where are you from? I say, oh, I'm from Austin. Oh my gosh, I love Austin. And inevitably it's a story about I was walking on the trail or I was, it has something to do about green spaces. But one thing I've also noticed is it tends to be a sort of, it tends to be a homogenous story a lot of times where it's like, if you go on the trail and you're in your workout gear and whatnot. And so sometimes I look at it and I say, that's amazing if you have the resources to be able to live downtown or to be able to do those things. And it sometimes misses the equity perspective. And it feels like that's a lot of what the organization is bringing back. Is that the right way to think about it?
It is. And the vision of our founders, which is extraordinary, was to return that joy to Austin for all, and all meaning all. It's an opportunity for Austin once again through innovation and brilliant design. It's an opportunity once again for Austin to show how a community reimagines its heart and learns from its errors and moves forward. And that was something that I really learned when I was here in the city before, in some of the work that I did as the president of HT and as a community citizen, was I had great hope about Austin. I have great hope about Austin, but at that time in particular, because I found it to be a city that was open to having the hard conversations at that time for equity. And I believe that when you have those hard conversations and you lean in, I would sit in spaces where presidents of banks would be together talking about how to get beyond predatory lending.
Mm-hmm.
I've said in a lot of forums with education as a great equalizer, what can we do to improve the educational system in Austin? And those were intentional conversations that were happening. That gives me great hope because that gives you progress towards where equity is not a buzzword, but instead it's a birthright. And people think, well, now you're CEO of Waterloo Greenway, that's kind of anti to who you are, but it's really the fabric of who I am. I mean, it's the basis of being able to use a tool. In this case, it's public spaces that are inclusive to be able to bring joy to all communities and to bring communities together because we're more alike than we are different. And
Absolutely.
This is an example of that kind of moment.
Absolutely. Am I remembering right? The Systemic Inequities Task Force that
Right,
you
right.
had
I
leadership
co-chair.
in,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
I know the financial components of that were pretty substantial. We were involved in that at that time, and
And
most
that's where I
people.
remember standing. Exactly.
Well, most people don't, and you don't know until you know, right?
Right.
I know. I
Right.
still feel relatively new to the financial services industry, so I've only been in this industry about 7 years, and so I was learning about how finance works, kind of along with this role, and there's so much under the way a system works that unless you go digging for it, you don't know why that just is the way that it is. And then people come together and they say, it doesn't have to be that way. We actually could do it differently, but it's got to have the intention behind it.
Exactly. And it cannot be performative. It has to be intentional. It has to be sincere. And that can be a challenge sometimes for large entities, but it's the people that make up the large entities. So back to the conversation about Waterloo Greenway, when you study the history of that area and you look at the intention, which is very far from performative, of the founders, they saw this beautiful space being returned to the citizens of Austin so that they can have it as their park. And it's extremely revolutionary the way we're doing it, because we are the philanthropic arm of the construction phase of phase one. Phase one was Waterloo Park with the Moody Amphitheater. And then phase two is the Confluence, which opens up, which is down by the lake, which opens up in May of 2026. And then phase three is pulling it all together, 4th through 12th Street, so that's the 1.5 miles. So the intention was to have us be a beacon of what Austin does so well, to pull ourselves together and to lift our own community with our own strength through collaborations and partnerships and concentric circles, and using the power of philanthropy and civic leadership to be able to deliver something back to all of the citizens in a very reformed way. I recently had a very phenomenal experience where a longtime Austinite who used to play in Waterloo Park in the late 60s and early 70s came on a tour of Waterloo Park, now phase one, and she was just amazed. And to quote her, she said that it just brought her great joy to see it return to its like a beautiful place. Now the challenge that we have as an organization is to put the type of programming and activities in the park so that we can make it where we get that synergy to bring it back. And I have full confidence that will happen in time.
I'm excited to hear about it. I know one thing, my boys are 11 and 15, and we live out in the suburbs. We live in the Cedar Park area, which has been great for them. But I make it a point to bring them into Austin proper, so to speak, because I want you to know, this is the city that drew us here. Even though we live in this other area and we are happy that we live there, it's the energy that is created in Central Austin that has created that pull. And so
Exactly.
helping them know, here's what this could be and here's what this is like. And it is very different for them in a way that I feel like it's almost like traveling in your own city sometimes, where you're like, let's experience a different culture.
A staycay.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
A staycay. And, that's a family field trip.
Mm-hmm.
And when the entire project is completed, you can be a pedestrian and never intersect with a car and walk all the way through the downtown area, experience that entire place with 35 acres of green space along the way. I mean, we're bringing the native environment. The hill country is one of my senior leadership likes to say, we're bringing the hill country into the city, the native plants, the trees, et cetera. I mean, it's just really extraordinary.
Wow. So you mentioned your husband sort of revealed to you, you love that city. And you believed him. Yeah, when he did. What is it that you sort of reflected on to say, yeah, that's true, that's right? What is it about Austin that makes you feel that way?
That environment of courageous leadership.
Say more.
Mm-hmm. It takes courage. It takes courageous leadership to change something, and especially to change the narrative around a conversation. And I witnessed a lot of courageous leadership, a lot of nervous leadership. But when you have angst and anxiety about something that's complicated, like race, like equity, like challenges when it comes to finance, banking industry, the education system, the healthcare system. But if you don't have the conversation from a point of truly wanting your city to be the best, like the place where you want to live and you want to grow your families, you want generations to be there. I saw people really leaning in and embracing the challenges that the city has had, and challenge is a small word, the city's history, and wanting to actually improve and uplift all and be, like I said earlier, where equity is not a buzzword, it becomes a birthright. And for me, I'm an activist in my soul, just from my own nature of my own upbringing and who I am as a person, and what I want for the students at Houston-Tillotson and, all students everywhere, all young people everywhere. They are our future. So that marries directly into the foundation of who I am as a person, as an individual. And I found a home here in Austin to be able to do what I call the heart work. And returning to the city, I have a different platform, but it's once again the same thing, to bring joy in people's lives where people deserve it. They deserve the best. It's not second class for anyone. And Austin is positioned to be able to do that, to be like the the city that's the beacon that has that kind of heart and thread. Just like with all the innovation in the tech, all that's brain power, brain work. We have that same kind of power in our heart work and in the work that we do and what we bring. Like this podcast, what you're doing here with the podcast, it's to really stretch people. Two things change people: a broken heart and an open mind. And opening people's minds to the reality of what is and the aspiration of what can be is how you shift the soul
Well,
of
and
a
one thing I
city.
hear in what you're talking about is optimism. I mean, so very often it feels like, especially when we talk about the challenges of our city, it can start to feel like, yeah, that here's all the problems, here's everything that's wrong here, and it sort of you get this attitude of we're not winning anywhere. Yeah, whereas what I'm hearing from you is like we got all the reasons in the world to believe we can win and some want to about how to do that.
And that's optimism is not a strategy; it's a feeling. I feel optimistic, and I'm also very well aware of how far we have to go. But if I fell into the camp of giving up and not having the will, then I am not doing future generations, my own children, any good. And even my own self while I'm here in this world. If my ancestors didn't have resilience and didn't have will to push towards what's right and just, I wouldn't be sitting here in this conversation with you right now. So I think about it like that.
Some folks talk about growth and inclusivity as if they are two sides of a coin, right? You can have one or you can have the other. You can't have both. I don't tend to feel that way, but I'm curious for your point of view on that. Balancing driving for growth as a community and as a city and making that growth inclusive. What's your point of view?
I don't think we can grow without being inclusive. It'll catch us one day. Where we've grown to a place and we haven't been inclusive and we look around and that growth is irrelevant. So those two things can be held in your hands at the same time. In fact, they're interchangeable because the inclusivity is what will help us to have sustainable growth.
I completely agree. We wake up one day and we only are a place that feels welcoming and people can succeed if you are from one background or you're from one area or you're one race, age, gender, etc., then we're not going to be very competitive because the best teams, if I'm thinking of our community as a team, the best teams, the most competitive teams are the most diverse ones. Yeah.
Right. Also, the magic of the city is rooted in that diversity and inclusivity. So maintaining the magic, what some people call keep Austin weird, I like to say keep Austin magical. It's really rooted in that. The music scene, the tech scene, the government scene, all those circles, all those industries, entities in Austin are what makes Austin magical is rooted in inclusivity.
I want to switch gears now, and I want to focus on you and your career and your leadership journey. I know I had a chance to learn a little bit about it when you were at HT previously. And I have heard you tell stories about how growing up as a student and the experiences you had as a student really shaped what made you passionate about working with students. And I would love to know what you learned from that you use in your career today.
So I learned that education really is the great equalizer. Education doesn't guarantee you anything, but it assures you advanced or more opportunities in your life. What you do with your education is personal choices, but education is the foundation to equity, to the great equalizer, so to speak. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a first-generation college student, and my dad just turned 92 this past Sunday. And we were interviewing him, asking him questions to capture his story. And in it, he said that he migrated, he was a part of the Great Migration from Mississippi to the north and settled there in Cleveland after serving in the military. And he said that he wanted his daughters to have a different life than what he had had as far as opportunity goes. So he was determined that we would be educated. And I told my son that I thought that college was the 13th grade. I didn't know that it was optional until I got there. And so when I look back over my life, it was my education is the foundation of much of my successes in not just in my career, but also in my life. My husband we're a retired military family, and back to Austin, to tie Austin into my story, we're a retired military family, and we've lived all over the country and all over the world. We've traveled the world, and I've lived in a lot of different cities, and every city thinks that they're special for different reasons.
Sure.
Every city we're different, we're special, but it's true in many of those cities. And Austin is one of those cities that stands out as a place that is a major chapter in my life. And I liked it so much, I came back for the second chapter, the next chapter. So, but my education rooted that, and not education, just not classroom education, but just in traveling and meeting different types of people and immersing myself in different cultures and raising my children and making sure they were exposed. And people often equate income to intelligence, and that is so far from the truth. And when you're a college president, particularly of a minority serving institution, you realize that your students need opportunities, exposure. They don't need to be saved. And they need to be invested in. So I'm an engineer undergrad, and I was corporate for 21 years. And then when my husband decided to retire from the military, it was my opportunity to take a leap of faith to follow my own passion, which is the passion of education. So that's how I got into higher education, and still doing it really today in my role as CEO. I'm very interested in the programming that we do. I'm very interested in educating the general Austin population about Waterloo Greenway, the Conservancy, and the role of it. I'm still engaged in Austin as a citizen. I think it's a civic duty that we all have. Muhammad Ali said that service is the rent you pay to be on this earth. So we all have an obligation to have a servant heart and to act that out intentionally, not in a performative way. So, I don't think I ever really wanted to be an engineer, but my education as an engineer taught me to think critically and in a certain way and to be an analyst. And, we learn backwards, and I say this a lot, to live forward. It's a Swedish philosopher's quote. And that is very real.
We learn backwards to live
forward. Because everything that's happened in our lives, broken hearts, we all have had our heart broken. All these experiences, we're all afraid of something. We all love something. We've all lost something we love. We've all had joy moments. We've all had painful moments. But all of those things are lessons in our lives. And all of those things prepare you for what you're going to be doing next. Even the role that I had in Indianapolis prepared me. I had a cultural institution, 150 plus acres. It prepared me for my role at Waterloo Greenway Conservancy because it lifted heightened my awareness and whet my passion. Actually sparked my passion for environmental sustainability. I had a little bit of it at HT because we have a really strong environmental program there, environmental justice program there. But managing that property there in Indianapolis, it's really sparked my passion about environmental sustainability and about trees and flowers and plants and native species. So that prepared me to be able to be a more effective CEO of Waterloo Greenway Conservancy. There are no coincidences in life. Coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous. So.
You have so many good sayings.
Oh, I'm old. So.
Wise.
I'm wise, right?
I know our CEO says all the time. He says, I've learned a lesson from every job I've ever had. I just sometimes didn't know what it was until afterward.
Now that's really profound.
Profound. Makes a lot of sense.
Profound, yes.
Well, so you've traversed private sector, public sector. In all the ways that I've known you, you are always kind of in the middle of that. I know we were at the Austin Chamber of Commerce together for a little while, and as I think about sort of, HT is sort of a civic institution, but there was always this sort of business lens to it, this business angle to it. And I know a lot of our listeners are similarly situated, and a lot of business folks in particular. So as you think about that intersection between our lives as business leaders, our lives as civic leaders, our lives as people who live in this community. How do you navigate that intersection?
So I think, I think that I see it as one. We have one life with many aspects in it. You have your family life, your work life, your play life, and they often intersect. So I can't be an effective civic leader if I am not really leaning into the business that I'm working at that time, being an integral part of that community. So when I got here in Austin in 2015, very little people knew about Houston-Tillotson University, and I saw it as a jewel in the city. And the city needs Houston-Tillotson, and Houston-Tillotson needs the city. You can't recruit young people to your campus if they don't see themselves in the greater region of Central Texas.
Yeah.
So I have an investment to make to be sure that that is a welcoming, inclusive environment for the young people that I want to bring here that we hope will stay and become a part of the business world, the civic world, the government world, whatever world that is. You want them to be a part of that and to unleash their genius into that environment. So what I do on my work and my career impacts my, they say we work to live and live to work. Which is, you don't spend so much time working to live that you don't actually get to live.
Sure.
So I really subscribe to that. And those pieces of my life, those sectors of my life, they all intertwine into one person. Because what I'm doing with my Waterloo Greenway, my role at Waterloo Greenway, is also a part of my civic role. Because I see Waterloo Greenway as something to make Austin just a very desirable place to live and be.
That was actually something that attracted me to Amplify, in that I was always of the opinion in what I did previously of I got to do a lot of community work, and that was beneficial to the organization I worked for. And so when I was talking with Amplify, I said, well, I'm not sure you know how much community things I do, and you need to know I don't do that because my job needs me to do it. I enjoy my job because it gives me a reason to do these things. And luckily I said, no, that's what we want. That we want our folks to be involved in the community, because when we are, we're better. And right now, actually, just this past summer, we hosted an HT intern with Rally Austin. So we helped to support. So Rally Austin, our economic development for the city of Austin, they had HT interns as real estate interns. And of course, that's a big part of our business is commercial and home lending. And so they reached out and asked, would you help to support this intern working with Rally Austin? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't think of a more perfect way of bringing together what we do as our day job as to something that we believe is important in the community. So we're going to build the city and support somebody in an institution that's important to the city. I'm like, it's just
that's what, and that interconnectivity is what makes it magical.
Yeah.
When I talked earlier about Waterloo Park being the communal stage, that's what makes it magical because of the interconnectivity. When I start secluding myself as a person from being engaged in my community, I'm not really lifting myself, and I'm definitely not lifting my community.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like an entity, a thing, and I'm not really leaning into making this place a wonderful place to be for me and for generations to come.
Absolutely. Something that we enjoy and want to go to, and that when we are not enjoying it and going there anymore, somebody else is.
And you spoke earlier about the problems that we have. Cities have moles and warts, all cities all around the world. There are big problems. We have really things that we're faced with. And it is that togetherness that really will help us to address those problems. And it takes time. And that's where that optimism comes in, and not, it's frustrating sometimes about you want to get discouraged and you just want to stop. But you have to dig deep down, back to that teamwork. You have to dig deep down and just keep going. There were nights when I was president of HT, there were nights that I would go home at night and I'm like, what am I doing?
Why am I working so hard?
Right. What am I doing with my life? And then I would wake up the next morning and I could not wait to get back to campus. So that's when I know that my professional passions have intersected with my personal passions, and that is a gift.
Absolutely. You mentioned Leadership Austin earlier and Courageous Conversations, and I know that is one of the platforms that they help to advance in the community. I mean, they have actual programs around Courageous Conversations, and I know that's a big part of their ethos. As you think about who in the community is helping us have those kinds of courageous conversations to face what are those big challenges and to do it in a way that is productive and that moves us forward. Anybody else that comes to mind for you?
Ashton Cumberbatch really does come to mind. I think Ashton is just he and his wife Jennifer, they're just good souls. And Ashton is the one. Ashton and Susan Dawson were the ones that came to me, and Ashton said to me, and I'm quoting him, "I'm going to change your life." And I thought, who is this guy? And he's the one that got me engaged with the mayor's office. He got me engaged with Arrow. He and Susan. Susan got me engaged with E3. So they are heroes, hero and sheroes. And I love both of them dearly.
Absolutely.
But Ashton and his wife are they're angels in our community, and Susan was a force to be is a force to be reckoned with. So
Absolutely. Susan is, I call her my cancer Sherpa.
oh yeah,
So I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2019. And she was one of the first people that I interacted with because we had known each other through E3 and Arrow and just some of those same organizations. And she and I didn't actually know each other that well, but she was a person I had known who had breast cancer. And so I end up on a call with her, and in about 20 minutes on a phone call with someone I've probably, I've sat next to her at lunch a few times. That was probably the extent of how we knew each other.
right.
By the end of 20 minutes, she had decided, nope, you're going to go to a different surgeon and I'm going to connect you to these 3 people and here's how
That's
it's going to help.
Susan.
And the Stacy in any other circumstance, I would have, who do you think you are? Yeah. But in that moment, I said, yes, ma'am.
Right,
And
right.
I did exactly what she
Right.
said. And
Susan and I are, well, she's a dear, dear friend. We're both engineers, and she's a Princeton engineer who was in the tech space and who followed her passion. She's an example, prime example of a person who all those things intersected, her civic life, her professional life, her family, all those things intersected for her, the work that she did to be able to lift E3 to national prominence and right here in Austin. And then plus this, just her community work with the chamber, et cetera. So Susan is one of those she's a force. And by choice.
absolutely.
Because she could have, rode off into the sunset as a tech person. And like earlier, what we were saying about growth and inclusivity, she realized that for this community to truly grow, she had to look at education as a way for it to be inclusive, for it to advance Texans, particularly Central Texans. So she's like the prime example, like in Webster, the person that we have, it'll be
That's
Susan
right.
Dawson's face there. She's really one of my sheroes.
I totally agree. Well, I have one last question for you, and I like to ask all of our guests. So, as you look back at Austin previously, what is the thing that you feel like has been the best thing about Austin? And as you look forward, what is it that you are most excited about for Austin's future?
So it's a continuum, the same thing. As I said earlier, I'm highly encouraged by a community that leans into having the conversation, the courageous conversation, where equity is no longer a buzzword, it's a birthright, and also where it's embedded in the fabric. When I think about like a legacy is what shifts the soul of a community. And we're talking about Ashton Cumberbatch, Susan Dawson. I think about the Gary Farmers, Tom Meredith, Melville Watley, Meredith Barnes, all our founders for Waterloo Greenway, Wilhelmina Delco, et cetera. All of those people shifted the soul of Austin. So as I look forward for Austin, generations to come, that there will be young people that knew that we designed our city and the components of our city to include Waterloo Greenway with them in mind, that we knew that their equity was going to be their birthright. And that's my hope for Austin.
Mine too. Thank you.
Thank you.